Each of us is looking for a change. Each of us wants to move from where we are to something else. Well, maybe we want to change just a little. Let's see if we can change and make it really big, and our life can become renewed. Alexander, you've taken on the love of Jesus in your life, and now you become an apostle, a lay person that's going around. You're going to Catholic churches, you're going to Protestant churches, you're making all kind of bridges with an experience of Jesus that you've had in your life that people are very attracted to, and they want to say, hey, I want to catch on to that. Could you tell us a little bit about how you got to this, let's say this plateau and this really great thing that's happening in your life? Was your love for Jesus always this strong, and were you always on fire with Christ?
In part, I can say yes, because of my family.
Ah, okay.
I'm the son of immigrants from Lebanon.
Lebanon. Now, when you come from Lebanon, you come from a different rite. Tell me about that.
The Eastern Rite of the Roman Catholic Church. The name is Maronite.
Maronite. Now, where's the word Maronite come from?
4th century monk named Maron, who went from Syria up into the mountains of Lebanon and created a monastery and a monastic tradition of Christianity from the 4th century.
Wow. So this has become a tradition from that far back for Lebanon. Are there Catholics, Maronite Catholics in Lebanon today?
Many. I mean, most of the Christians in Lebanon are Maronite Catholics.
Gosh, you think of the East or the Mideast, and you think that it's pretty much Muslim country. But you're saying now that there is an experience of Jesus that's very alive.
Lebanon has traditionally been Christian back to the early centuries.
Really?
Yes.
You're saying back to 300?
Back to 300.
Wow.
In fact, there was a time that much of the country of Lebanon was ruled by the patriarch. He was the head of state.
The head of state was a Catholic?
Patriarch.
Oh,
yes.
my gosh, isn't that interesting? Now, my curiosity is getting to me. What's this about in the Catholic Church? Are there other rites like this or others? You're saying Maronite. Are there others?
Yes, there are, I think, 13 what are called the minor rites of the Roman Catholic Church.
Now, what do you pray when you go? Are the liturgies that we have, like in the Catholic Church, we have that? Are yours similar to ours?
We are Roman Catholic.
Yes, but I mean,
but the form is slightly different.
What happens?
The prayers are a mixture of English and Arabic.
Ah.
The Maronite tradition, which was monastic, they wrote the divine office into the Eucharist, and so the liturgy opens much
What's
more
the divine
like
office?
praying of the Psalms.
What is that? Oh, praying of the Psalms.
Pray of the Psalms.
Praying of the Psalms. Okay. Now, do you do anything?
But we have, I mean, you know, the liturgy of the Word, liturgy of the table, Eucharistic prayer, communion, dismissal.
You're very close to Jesus with Lebanon. Israel and Lebanon are very close. Is there any connection with, like, the language that Jesus spoke? Do you have any connection with that yourself?
The Maronite Eucharistic prayer is in Aramaic, which is the language that we believe Jesus spoke.
So when you are listening to the priest pray these prayers, let's say over the bread and the wine, you're hearing the exact words that Jesus gave. Wow.
We're hearing those early original words.
Isn't that fascinating?
Yeah.
Now, that's a very rich experience, and this is what you were raised. So your experience of Jesus was very much in this Maronite experience.
It was in this Maronite experience in Birmingham, Alabama.
Birmingham, Alabama, that ain't exactly the center of Catholicism.
No. 0.5% when I was growing up.
Oh my gosh. Then you were a real minority.
We were a minority, and we were very much under the finger of the KKK. So
really? They were watching out for you?
They were watching out for all Catholics, and especially Catholic immigrants in Birmingham.
Oh, my.
So my parents told the story of In the 30s, Catholics went to church at 4 o'clock on Sunday morning to get home before dawn. That men in the congregation would be dismissed from the obligation of Mass because they would stand outside in the parking lots making sure that cars didn't slow down to write down license plate numbers.
Get out of here. Are you telling me this 1930s?
1930s, 1940s.
Oh my gosh, Alexander. Well, that really gives you a flavor of Jesus by experiencing the persecution and the struggle.
Yeah. To go to church, even as a child in the 1950s, to go into church was not a social club. You knew at one level you were putting your life on the line.
Oh my gosh. Now what about Jesus? Okay, we all come. I came from a Christian experience. By the way, my parents told me too. I was in Indiana when I was born. But we had a cross burned in front of our house by the KKK. It's interesting you say that because this is something similar to my own family. The little town of Muncie, Indiana, where I was born, was where the female branch of the KKK was started.
Right.
Fascinating. We can talk of those things. And a lot of times it can be very structural and it can be very cultural, if you will, in living this. And we could even miss Jesus because we could be doing what everybody else is doing. How did Jesus come into your life and how were you able to experience him through the midst of persecution?
The apostle in my life was my grandmother, in Arabic, Sitto. And I grew up on her lap. And I grew up with her telling me the gospel stories in Arabic, because she couldn't read or write, and she didn't know English very well. She could speak it, but she certainly couldn't read it. And as I would be on her lap, this incredible feeling language and the poetry and the imagery of it and the melody of her voice, and I can hear her heartbeat, and I can smell the light perfume that she wore. And she would tell me these stories of Jesus from the Gospels. And you knew that it was not an idea for her. It was alive in her. But there's a moment, and a horrible moment for our family. And it was the spring, I think, of 1957, Birmingham, Alabama, and we all stood outside her house as it was burned down.
Your grandmother?
My grandmother's house. And we assumed that it was KKK or KKK-like. You can't ever directly say it was this group or that group, but they went into the house that night and they took everything from Lebanon and made a huge pile of rosary beads and pictures of her family that she had brought and the few pieces of jewelry. And
Alexander.
Then on top of that, they added all the statuary and the missals. And then on top of that, they added the Bible. And on top of that, they placed all the crucifixes. And they doused it with kerosene and then threw kerosene around the entire house and lit the match. And
oh my gosh.
We all stood outside horrified. We didn't know where our Sitha was. She walked with a crutch, and she wasn't with any of us that night, which was so rare. We always knew where she was. And so we watched that house burn, and we didn't know if we were also watching her funeral pyre.
Oh my gosh. What happened? Tell me.
Well, later that night, she came back. A friend had dropped by and picked her up and taken her out for a ride. And so as the embers of the house cooled and that charred smell, there was this joyful reunion as she drove up and got out of a friend's car.
So she was shocked at seeing this, and you were so happy to see her.
But it's the next Sunday. We were always together every Sunday for dinner at her house. Her rule was, be here or be in the hospital, or we'll visit you at the cemetery. So there were 70 of us together that Sunday, like there was every Sunday. And we were in a new room, not her dining room. And she was in the center of the room with all my aunts and uncles, her children around her. And she said grace, and she looked out over the room, and she kind of pulled her glasses down, and she looked out at, I was at the kids' table at the back of the room. And I remember her words. She said, "No hate. We have our faith and we have each other. No hate." And all of those years of hearing the gospel stories, hearing about Jesus, in that moment, she became an embodiment of that spirit of the Christ. She lifted us all up out of the ashes. And she pointed us to a larger future. And I made some decision in that moment that I wanted to know where she got that power.
That is overwhelming.
And then I went into seminary. And in seminary, it was a torturous experience because I loved the prayer, I loved the material, and yet I somehow knew that this wasn't going to be the form of the way that I would serve.
I want you to give me a little bit about the reaction of your family to this. You're telling me that everything is going in one direction and you decide to go in the other. I'm thinking that this is going to be a tough call. Stay tuned. We're going to hear a challenge of what it means to make a decision that we know is right, but it doesn't necessarily what everybody else thinks is right. Stay tuned. Listen, please. I want to be with you, and I want you to be with me as we go together to the Holy Land, to the place where Jesus was born and where he brought us the salvation of his death and resurrection. Will you come with me, please, to this wonderful trip starting on February 21st to March 1st? A wonderful 10 days of experiencing Jerusalem and experiencing Galilee and Nazareth and even Bethlehem. The power of Jesus comes alive when you walk on the very place where Jesus walked and breathe the air that he breathed and see the mountains and experience the force of the holy city. Please, I'd love to have you come and be with us. This is a chance of a lifetime. There's a telephone number right on the screen. I want you to call and get the information you need so that you can be with us, and together we can understand more deeply the power of Jesus in our life. Alexander, you've had a call from God through a beautiful story of your grandmother, a real woman of God, and you moved according to what your family expected you to do, which was to go to the university first, but then to the seminary. But then you had to make a decision that this really wasn't where God was calling you, but your entire direction of your family was moving with these expectations, and you had to make a decision that went contrary to that. Tell us a little bit about the pain of that, if you will.
Well, it was very hard because I loved my faith. I loved Jesus the Christ. Here I was in seminary. It was the destiny of my family line. And it seemed perfect, but it wasn't right for my heart. And it was the most terrible moment of my life when I had to face my father and say, can't do it. And it became a hard moment for a long time because I immediately went into church work, and the longer I worked for the church, my father kept saying, but.
Go ahead, finish it off or something else.
Right. Why are you doing this as a layperson and not a priest? I think I can answer the question now, but 35 years ago it was, all I knew is that that wasn't where God was calling me.
How about your father? It was difficult. How did he react when you told him?
He never stopped loving me, but there was a time when it was hard for him to talk to me.
You got involved in the church, Your love is of Jesus, and your love is now perhaps in a way, a new way of being a priest, if you will, by serving the people of God in a new way. And you've gotten very, very close to the Bible, haven't you?
I have.
And one of
especially the Gospels.
Especially the Gospels. Tell us a little bit about this beautiful four-way formula that you have that not only touches the Bible, but even touches your whole life, or touches everyone's life as you experience it. Can you give us a little explanation about this?
Well, from those early days on my grandmother's lap, I knew that the words of the Gospels were true. But as I went into theology studies and I learned all the intellectual good information that you need to know, it's like my head and my heart were at odds. My heart knew it was true. My head was like, well, how can this make sense?
There are a lot of contradictions.
There are contradictions. And then there was a moment 7 years ago, almost exactly 7 years ago. A night, I would like to say a night in prayer, and this way of understanding the Gospels, a way of understanding, I think, why the early Christians so clearly knew that these were the four Gospels.
Now, tell us a little bit about that. I think we all just kind of take it for granted that Jesus left and the church came out and we wrote four Gospels, boom, and that was it, and there was never any question that there would have been other Gospels or anything. Right. Tell us a little bit about that, would you?
Well, we actually know from science that there were about 27 different texts that were called a gospel.
I've heard of things like the Gospel of Thomas. There's the Gnostic Gospels, and
Philip,
and the Philip and
fragments
and Peter,
of Mary, and
yes,
now something called the Gospel of Judas.
Yes, yes, yes. So these were actual gospel stories that were written so that the early church, and this is kind of fascinating, they didn't have this little book of the Gospels with them.
No.
They might have had a whole bunch of books, and there were people with good faith and good love were saying, hey, let me tell you this story of Jesus.
Right.
And let me tell you this is the story of the salvation that we're experiencing.
Right. And I want to take it a step further, because I know as a Semitic person, having grown up in a Semitic village in Birmingham, Alabama, that the sacred scriptures were always composed for prayer. Prayer first. Not to read them, pray them.
Ooh, interesting. What do you mean pray?
And
what do you mean pray?
What do you
mean pray them? What do you mean pray the scripture?
They were composed for Sunday worship, for when the community was gathered. They would be chanted over and over again as a form of prayer. Because they believed, as I know, that there's a grace in the words, in the text. Study them, yes. Learn them, yes. But more than anything, pray them.
So okay, let me jump into that then. If I say, let's say I'll take the beginning of the Gospel of John, and I just start saying that. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was God. The Word was with God. That becomes a prayer, huh?
Yes.
Oh, that's interesting.
And
I don't think we think about that, do we?
We don't.
We just kind of listen to it and say, well, I don't understand this one, and especially in the Catholic Church, where you get three readings come at you, and sometimes they're so confused and so different that you're kind of whoom, whoom, whoom coming at you. But now you're saying, pray.
Pray them. Go back and say those words again. Stop. Go back and say those very words again. And let them make that road from the head to the heart, and from the heart to your whole self.
Wow, that's beautiful. That's a neat thing. That's a paradigm shift, if you will. Right. That when we come to Mass, when we come to church, and we start hearing those words said, there's a prayer. But you've found an interesting, a little formula, if you will, a fourfold formula that kind of opens this up in a new way, the power of the gospel. Tell us about that.
Right. Bishop Irenaeus, I know it's a strange name, 180, first person who wrote anything about which gospels the church should choose.
Okay, so he's the one kind of helping to pick up out of the 50 or so possibilities, picking these
What
four.
he said was, we need four gospels. And everybody's like, 4? Well, why not 5 or 3 or 1? Why not 1? 4.
Yeah.
And he writes this beautiful treatise about the 4 prayers, the 4 spiritual practices, the 4 points of the cross, the 4 winds, the 4 directions, the 4 rivers. And it seems sort of mystical, but it doesn't make sense to us today. But here's the key. He actually helped us choose the Gospels because we know we have 4 great questions before God. And each of these Gospels is one of those questions. And when you put those 4 questions in the sequence that early Christianity prayed them, and in the Second Vatican Council, this is the sequence that has come back to us in the Sunday lectionary, this is the great journey of faith. 4 simple questions. How do you face change?
Change.
In the risen life of Jesus the Christ, how do you face change?
All right, okay.
Gospel of Matthew.
Okay.
Second question, in the risen life of Jesus the Christ, how do you move through suffering?
When you make a change, you're going to start suffering. Okay. Because it's going to be tough. That's
It's
going to be part.
It is.
It's going to be tough. So change, suffering.
Third is, how do you discover joy?
That's what we all want. We all want to be happy. We want
Gospel
that
of
joy
John.
in our life. The Gospel of John.
John.
So Matthew is a choice. Mark is the next one, and as it follows here, Mark is certainly the one of the suffering servant.
Right.
You know? John is the experience of joy. John is
Joy.
really the elevated experience of the victory of Christ in a strong way. Huh?
Absolutely, but it comes with a danger for our small selves. We latch onto that joy and we forget that there's a critical 4th question. The joy is not for us alone. And the 4th question is, how do we mature in service?
Got to do something with it.
The joy is for service.
The joy for
Gospel
service.
of Luke and Acts of the Apostles.
One of the most difficult parts of Christianity is believing that my happiness comes in serving other people. Isn't that crazy? You know, in our world, it's not, it's gimme, 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 gimme.
Right.
But Jesus comes and says, if you really want to be happy, you serve, and that's what joy is about.
Right.
Oh.
And the early church knew this pattern. I call it the pattern of grace, or the way of the risen Jesus. That Jesus actually leads us and wants us to change. And that when we face the moment of change, Jesus leads us into what feels like deeper suffering.
We've lost.
Leads us there.
Well, we've lost things that we were comfortable with.
Yeah. But through that experience, we find a joy we could never have imagined. And when we find that joy, we also know that it comes with a gift for ourselves, but especially for others.
We're going to be coming back in just a moment. I want you to listen. I want to tell you about a book. We're going to be talking about his book because it's not just a matter of many lectures, but it's also a beautiful book, at least the first part. Stay tuned. Listen to this. We're going to be right back. Jesus has called on us to share the good news of his kingdom around the world. Not only is it something that we receive in our own hearts and are blessed by that, but we are called to go out and call the world to the kingdom of Christ. Now, this is something that television does. Through television, we are able to get into the lives of those people that don't go to church, that are sometimes very far from the Lord. The message can seep in and open up the doors of forgiveness and peace and the kingdom of God. This powerful way of sharing the good news is something that you are responsible for. We need your help. This television program is something that happens through your prayers, but also through your sacrificial giving, both small and large, gifts that allow us to continue to share the good news around the world. Please know that we are deeply dependent on you to make that sacrifice right now. Now, in order to to invite you to be willing to share. I have a wonderful gift that I want to share with you. For your donation, I would like to send you this CD called Healing Power. This is a wonderful meditation to be used for people who are anticipating, let's say, an operation, or perhaps are recovering after an operation, or struggling with sickness. This is a powerful way of allowing the message of God's love to touch you with peace and true healing. I want to send this to you. It's a wonderful CD produced by our friend Sister Joni, a Benedictine nun, done right here at the WordNet Studios. You can be enhanced with the power of God's love for you. Please, we need your support, and I'd like to share with you this special gift. You've written a very, very good book. I've been able to get halfway through. And I really resonate with the four images that you give. You know, this is going to go through the first two Gospels, and then we're going to get another chapter, or another book that is going to cover all four. But look at this, and please get involved in this. This is a very important thing. This prayer for the Bible, and the Gospels especially, but also finding ourselves in that fourfold road. I like the word change. Jesus calls us to change. He calls us to a real sense of suffering because it hurts to change, and that's why we don't want to change.
Exactly.
But there's a joy that comes from that, and the joy that then overflows is a joy that allows us to give ourselves to the people we're with. We're trying to reach out to the people that are watching the television show, and we're trying to pray for them. Many people have written in letters. They've also written in emails, too. We've got a web page, and they can come in and they can leave their prayer intentions even on the web page. Look at some of these here that heart bypass, asking for prayer. You know, her brother Augustine, praying for our program, and also praying for the Heller family, praying for those that are part of the Catholic Church. Lord, bless these people, bless all of their needs, and work your miracles. Challenge them with change, challenge them with strength in the midst of their sufferings. Give them your joy, and give them that road to service that can really lead to the joy that is beyond anything we can understand. And may Jesus' love for you always make you smile. God bless you, Alexander. Thank you so much for being with us. God bless you.